learning how to simplify forms is as big a challenge as learning how to render things like super realistically.
It really is.
I'll plan out like an entire game design in like some massive grand vision of a flowchart, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm done.
My work here's done. Welcome everybody to another episode of Industry Standards Podcast. I want to tell you a little bit about our podcast before we get to introducing our wonderful guest of today. The Industry Standards Podcast is an effort to bring to you some of the best and brightest minds in the games, VFX, films, animation, 3D printing industries, you name it. If it touches 3D, even remotely, we're talking about it. We want to, share experiences, knowledge, advice, best practices, the latest trends, news, and things like that with the whole industry, because we know that sometimes this kind of information can be difficult to achieve or attain. Before we get started, let's shout out the sponsor of today, Ringling College of Art and Design. You'll be hearing more from them at some point in this episode. It's also where I work. I like to talk about them sometimes. I'm your host for today, Ana Carolina Pereira. I am a 3D technical artist, game and VR developer, and character artist on the side. I teach, like I mentioned, at the Ringling College of Art and Design in two majors, game art and VR. And I obviously do a lot of stuff online. If you don't know me, go follow me. And, we're going to talk about our guests, links and stuff. I forgot to mention to you that we can also promote your links and stuff.
Oh,
yeah, we'll do that. So today with me, I have Nick Carver. Nick is a 2D concept artist and game developer who does literally a little bit of everything. It's kind of astounding. We're going to show you guys some of his work in a second. You will literally be shocked. Nick has almost 20 years in the industry, in the games industry, and has worked at amazing... I'm going to have to read. There's so much stuff in here. So... He's worked at Riot, Blizzard, Epic, Heart Machine, That Game Company, Bungie, and Phoenix Labs, and has made concept art for titles such as Arcane and Overwatch. So Nick works primarily as a concept artist, right?
Yep, that's right.
But what really makes him stand out even more, his concept art is amazing, by the way. Don't take it as reductive or anything, but he makes his own interactive video games and demos, vertical slices, complete demos, the works by himself. He does amazing visual development, stuff you've never seen before, games that look like watercolor or pixelated games and things like that. With everything, right? The animation you do, the coding, the post-processing, the modeling, the level design, the layout, the design itself. So much stuff. So, Nick, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited to talk to you.
No, I'm super happy to be here. And thanks so much for that intro. And I'm looking forward to chatting and hopefully providing some info for people out there who want to get into the industry or, move up in the industry.
Absolutely. There's plenty of us all looking for amazing advice from folks like you. So I'm going to showcase some of Nick's work on the screen. If you're listening in from Spotify or Apple Music, I'm really sorry. You better get on YouTube now. We're going to show a little bit of his work while he kind of tells us a little bit about himself and how you got your start in the industry, what inspired you to come into the industry, and your journey so far.
Sure, yeah. So I started out, like everybody else as a kid, was very much into video games and animation and movies and all that stuff, but kind of gave up on art in my teens at some point and just didn't think that was necessarily a career that I could pursue. We're talking, early days of the internet, very little information on the games industry, how to make art for games or anything like that. So I actually pursued studies in languages mainly. I went to university to study Japanese language and culture, and I did that for 4 years and graduated. But then in my final year, just kind of decided that I really wanted to do something creative as a job. I didn't want to be necessarily a translator or an interpreter, which is kind of where I was headed. I finished my degree and I moved back in with my parents for a year. They were obviously very excited that I was kind of ditching this degree that they'd helped me, supported me financially to actually complete. But yeah, I moved back in and I worked sort of minimum wage jobs for a while, and basically, taught myself rudimentary 2D and 3D game art stuff, Photoshop and 3ds Max, made a portfolio, and was really fortunate that the city I moved to like a year later with my wife, girlfriend at the time, there were a few studios there, and I happened to get like a very entry level, like junior character artist position, junior texture artist, junior character artist position.
Which studio was that one?
Free Radical Design. They made Time Splitters and some other games that were less popular and successful. But yeah, that was kind of my break into the industry, and just kind of, managing to get in with a very kind of rough portfolio. I just realized immediately, oh wow, looking at other people's work and the fact that they actually had sort of backgrounds in art, they'd had art education and things like that, that I really needed to level up quick. So I basically spent the next sort of 5 years doing a lot of self-study, learning all the fundamentals that I should have learned before I got a job working in the industry. And that was up till sort of 2009. And then, got the opportunity to move and work at Blizzard in California, and was there for sort of 7 years working on Titan, the MMO that wasn't, and then an R&D project that was a very small team that never got talked about, that was also shelved. But thankfully, I moved back onto what became the Overwatch team, and worked on that project as a concept artist. And then, like about 7 years ago, my wife and I decided to relocate back to the UK, and I've basically been freelancing and contracting for one company or another since then.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So what made you think as a teenager that you couldn't do art? Was it like the stereotype, starving artist or something like that?
No, it wasn't. No, it wasn't to do with whether it was financially viable. It was more to do with the fact that I didn't think that I had the ability to do it. I was really good. Well, I was like relatively good as a younger kid, like in my early teens, or even before that. I was quite good at drawing like cartoony little comic strips, and I could copy comic book panels pretty well. But for some reason, I couldn't make the connection between, or the step between that and, like, say, life drawing, or observational drawing. Like, I had the cartoon thing down, but then when I tried to, say, draw a bowl of fruit or whatever the cliche thing that you do in art class was, I just couldn't get near it. I just ended up feeling like I was, I think at the time I had a problem with struggling with anything. Like, certain things came easier to me than others. Like, learning languages was something that was relatively straightforward, and I like foolishly thought that if I'm really struggling at something, it just means that I'm not meant to do it, or I'm not meant to get better at it. And it really wasn't. It really wasn't until there was two things actually. One was I really got into skateboarding in my teenage years, and that is the thing where you like fail constantly for weeks and months and years, and it's a very gradual process to get better and be less, terrible at it. And then when I went to university, going from learning like European languages like French and German, Japanese was obviously like very different in terms of how it's structured, and just like the basic alphabet. Well, kanji versus a kind of European Roman alphabet. And so I had to study like really hard. It was the first time, I think, where I was like terrified of failure. And so I just kind of really applied myself in a way that I probably hadn't previously. And then, after I graduated, I just kind of realized that I could apply a similar, methodology of like learning and breaking things down into component parts as I had done with Japanese. In order to learn that, I could kind of apply that to learning art. And that's kind of how I started to try and structure my own learning, because obviously, I didn't have a sort of formal background in it. I developed a way of learning that suited my own pace, my own sort of, the ways that I learned best, basically. And I've kind of carried that on ever since in one way or another,
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine maybe that's the secret behind how you're able to do so many different skill sets? Would you say that's?
I mean, possibly, yeah. I definitely, I think it's a combination of, yeah. I mean, I definitely, I didn't. It makes it sound like as soon as I started putting my mind to it, that I like immediately made a lot of progress. Like I really didn't. Like it was very frustrating the first sort of few years of trying to get better. And I think oftentimes it was a case of trying to do too much too soon, and kind of having a picture of something in my mind of how I wanted it to be, but then when I actually went onto the computer or I sat down with a pen and paper, I couldn't get anywhere near it. And it was just this very gradual process of realization that if I'm struggling at something, it probably means either I don't understand what it is that I'm attempting to do, or I haven't broken it down into small enough constituent parts that I can, sort of succeed at a sort of lower level and then gradually build it up and up and up. And I guess there is a lot of overlap with whatever skill you're trying to learn, is like not trying to do too much too soon. You kind of either get discouraged, or at least I do in my case, I get discouraged, or you don't actually retain any knowledge because you're kind of, trying to do too much at once, or you're kind of spreading yourself too thinly. So I definitely try and be sort of process oriented and very sort of, I don't know, methodical is the wrong word because I jump all over the place, but I definitely try and break everything down into, component pieces that are understandable, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, my students make the mistake of not doing that a lot. And I teach them agile development. I don't know if you ever used that before, but
It's something I've
basically
heard of, but yeah, I've not used it.
we break the tasks down into stories, and they have to have like the description, and they should be small, like, but students will be like, make model test. That's task number one. Task number
Right.
two is retopologize, and things like that. So I try to break it down a lot more, because then you can focus. You can do little moments of like R&D, in
Yeah.
between. There's nothing wrong with trying to figure out new ways to do things, or like, learning how other people do things. So many
Hmm.
people feel that that's cheating as well, which I think is funny. If it wasn't for Google, I wouldn't be where I am now, and I would imagine a lot of other pros too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I mean, I owe the internet kind of everything that I've learned, I think, pretty much. I mean, I've learned lessons from, people from working in studios, just either directly asking questions of them or just watching other people work. Like, obviously you pick things up. But yeah, I mean, so much of the progress that I've made has been entirely because of the internet, So, and yeah, just like watching other people work, or watching tutorials or whatever. Or I mean, I think that I like to do a lot, particularly when it comes to game development stuff, is, if there's a project or an asset that is doing the thing that I want to do or is close to it, I'll just get hold of that thing and then kind of take it apart and start to play with different pieces within whatever that thing is. And that's kind of how I learn, is that more sort of visual, like autodidact kind of way of doing it. Like, I don't have like a programmer brain. I'm definitely much more of like a visual thinker, like maybe a language thinker, but yeah, certainly not like a coder. So yeah, just being able to see things visually on screen and be able to see what's happening in real time. Like I change something, and immediately I see the result of it. That kind of helps me to understand what's happening.
Kind of like a reverse engineering approach for a lot of
Yeah,
stuff.
definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
So you started off drawing cartoons. You went into a little bit of, 3D modeling. So
Mm-hmm.
how did you end up here doing a little bit of everything?
Well, I mean, I started out as a character artist, and then after I moved to Blizzard, I was on Titan, and it was a great project. And yeah, the concept art being generated for the project was amazing. Arnold Sang, who became the main character concept artist for Overwatch, and assistant art director on that project, he was doing a lot of the designs that we were building within the character team, and it was awesome. But I just started to feel like, oh man, I'd really like to be doing some actual design. And I'd been working on my 2D stuff, off my own back for the previous sort of 5 or 6 years. So I sort of gradually tried to get opportunities, on the team, and it was still small enough at that point where I could ask if I could do a bit of like prop design or, sort of maybe some architecture or things like kind of lower level, concept art. And just, little by little, I started to do more and more of that to the point where it just made sense for me to move over to the environment team. And so I ended up doing a mix of like in-game assets and, concept sheets for like props, vehicles, architecture, stuff like that. After Titan got, paused or put on the shelf or whatever the term is, like I say, I went onto this R&D team, and it literally was 4 of us. There was a designer, a programmer, or 2 programmers, and myself. And so I was the art team on that project, basically for at least a year and a half. So I kind of got to do everything at that point. I had to do everything at that point. So I was doing, all of the actual sort of character art, environment art, bits of level design, bits of animation. I'm not an animator. I definitely lean heavily on pre-existing, assets or, animation resources like Mixamo and stuff like that. So that there's definitely a gap in my skill set. But I was learning how to do animation on that project as well. So, and then after that project got shelved and I was back working full-time as a concept artist again, I just had, just such a desire to continue like doing more of that style of game development, which was very, much like kind of small and scrappy development team. And that's when I got into Unity. I had a friend of mine he just sat me down one Saturday afternoon, I remember it well, and said, I'll show you how to put together, and he was an artist as well, like he wasn't a programmer. Jason Morris is his name. And he had started using this visual scripting tool within Unity called Playmaker. And he said, just come over one Saturday and I'll show you how to put together like a rough first-person shooter in a couple of hours. And that seemed like, not possible to me. But like, sure enough, like I went over and he just like hooked up a few nodes and got things running. And it was like, it made sense to me in a way that programming never would, just like that visual thing. And like visual scripting in this style is not the most efficient way to program at all. But in terms of the stuff that I like to do, which is oftentimes prototypes or, kind of relatively simple mechanics, things like that, like I think it's totally feasible to make games that way. But anyway, he showed me how to do it and I was like, oh, wow, like this is something that I can understand. And kind of after that, it's just been a journey really of just, learning what different buttons within Unity do and just like dragging different, like, because of the way this, and there are multiple different visual scripting solutions, including Bolt, which is Unity's own thing. Like you can basically grab a component from any object into the window and like expose all the variables that are there and like just play around with anything you want. And I think that's it. Like, visual thinkers, which most artists are, like you give them a way to actually create interactive content. Like once you can get over that initial hump and you realize you can kind of create anything you want and it can be, interactive to whatever degree you want it to be. I think that's like a really powerful tool. And it was sort of, a bit of a moment of epiphany for me, really. I've just been kind of following that path ever since.
That's so nice. Like one of my specialties is also visual scripting, specifically blueprinting in Unreal.
Oh, yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and I teach it all the time. And I've always appreciated blueprinting, but these past 2 weeks I've been teaching Python. And it really gives me a next level appreciation for not having to worry about syntax. I'll be doing a demo and I'll be like, and now let's see if it works. And it's like, nope, because you forgot like one like colon in line 23.
Yeah.
Get wrecked.
That's exactly how I am as well. I'm like, and occasionally I will have to go in and like mess with a script to get it to do what I want it to do, like just kind of hack something that's already been written. It's that exact thing. It's like, why isn't this working like this? Like, And then it is just like, oh, you put a space there, or like you forgot a bracket here. I was like, oh,
It
come on,
sucks.
please
To
let me
me
off that one
anyway.
bracket. Yeah.
But I do get to feel like a super cool person while I'm doing it, like I'm about to like hack the mainframe or something.
Right? Yeah,
Right?
yeah. I've yet to see the movie sequence where somebody is like dragging nodes to like
Oh yeah.
hack the pentagon.
It zooms out. It's like spaghetti, you know.
Yeah.
I have a student who only turns in spaghetti code, and every time, like,
Right.
I'll be shocked. And he was like, "Well, when I was younger, well, as in like a few years ago, um, he goes, I used to think it looked so cool and so like advanced when he did it like this." And I'm like, "Oh no."
Yeah. Yeah, less is
Um,
more for sure with those
Definitely.
things. Yeah.
So your work is really stylized and actually like super super neat and super cool. For example, we have one on the
Thank you.
screen right now that's basically like watercolor like
Mm-hmm.
effects. You mentioned something that ties in with something I've been wondering about and I've been
Mm.
dying to ask. And like literally any stylized artist ever, like there's a little bit of gatekeeping in our industry, I think. And you can tell me if
Mm.
you've found this before, where like a lot of people consider stylized art to be not the top of the line. You know, people are like, you know, that's why you mentioned like you weren't doing figure drawing and like realistic stuff, so you didn't feel like you
Mm-hmm.
could do it. But cartoons, you were good at that, and somehow you didn't feel like that was of the same value, I guess, at the time. Have
Yeah,
you
right,
encountered that
yeah.
kind of like thinking?
I'm sure it exists. I've like, with the exception of a couple of the years when I was a free radical, and like, everyone was making the shift to next gen, and everyone was suddenly doing like super realistic characters. So I did sculpt my fair share of like, you know, cargo pants and like bulletproof vests
Combat
and
boots.
like yeah, exactly. I did that and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. But outside of that, I've not really worked on any realistic games. So from my perspective, like everywhere I've worked since then, it's all been about stylized aesthetics, to one degree or another. Blizzard has, obviously World of Warcraft and Diablo
Yeah.
and StarCraft and Overwatch, and like they're all different, varying degrees of stylized. And then the stuff that I've done as a freelancer, like it's varied from, stuff like Arcane that's on the more detailed, painterly end of stuff, to like really quite simple, like abstracted, definitely, yeah, sort of more simplified aesthetics. And I've never really encountered any sense that it's like lesser or anything like that. Like I
That's
think a
good.
lot, well, at least in terms of the people that I've worked with, I think everyone realizes that, I think, like regardless of the art style, in order to do it successfully, you've got to make a lot of decisions, a lot of smart decisions, and you've got to, learning how to simplify forms is as big a challenge as like learning how to render
It
things like
really,
super realistically.
really is.
Yeah, and I guess it just comes down to aesthetic taste. Like, I can appreciate super realistic stuff done well, but I definitely gravitate more towards, more stylized ends of the spectrum, I
Yeah.
think.
I've been gravitating towards stylized too. Maybe it's the world of Twitter and or academia that gave me this idea. I'll be honest though, stylized has a lot of benefits. For one, it ages a lot better, right?
Yeah.
Right? Have you ever seen a hyper realistic game age well? Like not yet. We're not there.
Yeah,
We're not even there
it's
yet.
true. It's true. It's true. I think there are some that, like, maybe it's just my own perspective, but I think there are a handful that look okay, but they didn't necessarily go like full bells and whistles. Like I feel like Half-Life 2 still looks pretty good, even though it's like a 19-year-old game. But like it's definitely the exception. Yeah, most of them you look back now and it's like, even the ones that were like, this is the best a game has ever looked, and
Yeah.
maybe a game will ever look. And you
I
look at it
remember
now and
that.
it's like, ooh, yeah.
Hey folks, if you're enjoying this podcast episode so far, make sure to drop us a like, follow, and maybe even a review. Share this podcast with your friends and people that might be wanting to come into the industry or already in that might be interested in this content. This will help us grow and it will greatly support the podcast so that we can keep bringing you this content and even more guests. Thank you so much. And another thing about Stylized that I've dealt with, since I deal with so many students and newcomers in the industry is people think it's easier, and that is
Oh,
like
right.
the most, that is a mistake. Right. I've had students pitch entire stylized projects and they'll put something like something that's slightly hand painted on their like mood boards or like slime ranchers or something like that, and I'm like, why? And they're like, oh, because realism's too hard. And I'm like, have you ever tried stylized like this? Have you? Do you even know what a gradient is?
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, you can see like all the hope and joy come out of their face and they realize that they're in trouble regardless.
Yeah. I think that's it. Like any style, like I said, like you have to make so many decisions, Okay, maybe if you made like literally like, stick men walking on like triangle grass, then you might not have to make too many decisions. But 99% of aesthetics out there, they have been like thoroughly, if they're successful, they have been like thoroughly and completely designed from from like the most important thing on screen to the smallest detail. So like making everything sit cohesively and feel like it's part of the same world is a real challenge. And also learning how to do that between different styles. Like each style presents its own challenge. And even though like I kind of feel like the more you do, the more you can kind of see the connections between different aesthetics. Like you're still making a conscious and continuous effort, and you're kind of in a dialogue with yourself and with whoever else is working on the project to like make sure you don't like stray from whatever that aesthetic goal is. So yeah,
it's really tricky to maintain cohesion within the same project.
Yeah,
multiple artists working on the same different assets. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have this friend, Emma Koch. Have you ever?
Yeah, her work's great.
Amazing.
I've seen, yeah.
Oh my god, her work sometimes looks like a 2D drawing, and then it rotates, and you're like, oh,
Yeah.
So one time I asked her for help with some stylization, and she's thinking on a level that I didn't even consider. She's like measuring the colors of the shadows and like the roundness, the like whether the highlight is white or not. If there's an outline, what colors of the outlines, and comes like the angles. Are all the highlights the same colors based on angles and stuff like that? I'm like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of stuff that you have to do, that like photorealism just kind of comes out of the bat. Just like you just kind of use the PBR, you roll with it.
Yeah. I definitely think that, anytime that you stylize something, even if you're doing like anatomy studies, and I did end up doing some amount of anatomy studies, like even though I didn't start out that way, but I found the easiest way, the best way for me to learn, whether it was anatomy or drapery or whatever it was to stylize the studies that I was doing, like make deliberate choices to change what I'm looking at, in terms of the photo reference or whatever it was, like, because then you're in a dialogue with yourself about like, what is this shape in front of me, or like, what is the color of this particular element, and like, do I want to represent it in a literal way, or do I want to change it? And it's exactly right with what you say in terms of using PBR. Obviously, you out of the box get a sort of fully rendered, believable, full value range lighting system, but yeah, you didn't necessarily make any decisions about why you wanted, the light to be this color, or why you wanted to restrict the value range, or why you wanted to only use like these colors in this part of the image or the scene or whatever. So I definitely think there's a lot to be said for, being deliberate about those things, and having to be deliberate about those things.
So appeal is a huge part of stylization. We talk a lot about it in character design, but honestly, I think it applies to everything,
Sure.
right? There's two
Yeah,
things
yeah.
in an appealing environment. I'm looking at one right now. Here we have, for my podcast listeners, some beautiful rocks with a character that stands out due to more saturated colors.
Hmm.
You know, everything else has soft shadows. There's not a pure black anywhere on this composition. What would you say are some of the keys to create an appealing, like, visual look for your pieces?
I think it, like, fundamentally. I mean, it's hard. It's hard to answer succinctly. Let
You
me
could write
think
a
about
book
this.
about this, probably. Like,
Yeah. So I think it's a number of things. I think obviously subject matter plays a big role in it. I mean, this isn't like the most interesting of subject matters. It has to be said. Like, this was really this particular image was just a test to see if I could, because basically all these rocks are photogrammetry assets. I wanted to see if I could use photogrammetry but turn it into something that felt like stylized and painterly. And then it was kind of after that, I started to try and like put like a narrative into this scene, and kind of just built it out from that wall, basically. But yeah, I would say subject matter is huge, and even if it's not something that's necessarily very specific or overt or high concept, like something like this, or like a forest scene where you've got nice dappled shadows and you've got, green grass and lots of foliage and, some warms and some cools and, hopefully a nice balance between the two. Like that stuff, like, a nice kind of idyllic pastoral scene like that is something that people respond to on an emotional level. But I think as well, color is such an emotional motivator. So if you can use color well, and I wouldn't consider myself like somebody who's like amazing with color. I think I can be effective with it, but like having taken classes with some like really phenomenal concept artists from the animation industry, people like Nathan Fowkes, for instance, I took one of his courses when I was in California, and it's just so like color used well and oftentimes used as simply as possible is just so impactful, in terms of carrying an emotional beat. So I think if you can have, a, a subject matter that people respond to, a composition that draws the viewer or the player into, wherever you want them to look, and then you kind of use a color scheme or a lighting scheme that supports the emotion that you want to convey, then like I feel like those three things are sort of the sort of holy trinity when it comes to conveying something, conveying a message visually.
Ringling Pre-College is seeking visionary VR students with the story and drive to succeed. Do you see yourself creating a three-dimensional, computer-generated virtual reality environment where users can be immersed within your imagined or simulated worlds? Is it games, training, or emotional support? What inspires you to do this work? If this describes you, we want to hear your story. What excites you about these possibilities? Submit your 500-word story in writing or video by March 3rd to mmurphy@c.ringling.edu. 3 selected entries will be awarded $1,000 each towards pre-college 2023 tuition. 1 selected entry will be awarded a full scholarship to pre-college 2023. In accepting the award, you fully agree to enroll in the virtual reality immersion. Visit www.ringling.edu/precollege and click on Connect with Us to book an online info session. And make sure to submit your written or video story as described above. Back to our programming.
That is awesome. And I love it. And I'm inspired, like, by looking at your portfolio. I literally want to make more things and have a little bit more fun with arts. Like, that's the vibe I'm getting. So I could be projecting. But what I like about your work is two main things. I like a lot of other stuff too. Two main things. One, that it's exploratory. Like, you're exploring new things. You're curious and you're trying to answer these questions for yourself. And in the process, creating really cool art. The second thing I really like is that it seems to have an element of fun. Like,
Sure.
we talk a lot about fun in game development. Obviously it's an important part of game development, let's be honest, right? But in this case, I'm feeling a sense of like true, like a little bit of joy, like in the work.
Sure.
Like it
Yeah.
doesn't feel like the kind of work that we see all over everybody's portfolios is too commercial, geared
Mm-hmm.
only towards getting a job or fitting in,
Yeah.
It's different. I like that. Would you say that those things are accurate, or is it just
Yeah, no, that's totally right. I think, yeah, I do consider myself to be curious about a lot of things, and the best way for me to prove, or indulge my curiosity is to basically just start making something. And with a lot of these things, like it isn't like completely done in isolation. Like I often have a larger idea for like a game or story scenario that I then kind of use as a way to get into whatever the task is that I'm working on. But yeah, definitely curiosity is a massive motivator for me, almost to a fault, I would say. Like I kind of am always curious to do something new, try something different. So I've definitely left a lot of things kind of half finished in a lot of ways because I just get a new idea that seems like the most important thing to be getting into. And, the thing that I was absolutely hooked on, for the last X number of weeks or months, like suddenly it doesn't quite seem so appealing. So yeah, I could definitely do a better job of maybe finishing stuff out to a higher degree. But yeah, I kind of feel like the thing that has really pushed me to continue progressing, the last couple of decades has been just this desire to learn and just to try different things and to always be curious about like different ways to improve. But I definitely treat this stuff as, I try and still treat it as a hobby, even though it's my job. I try and enjoy these, like the stuff that I set for myself. Like I try, even though it's, sometimes it can be a challenge if things don't come out the way I want them to look. I definitely, I just try and enjoy it as much as possible because,
So tell us, what does it take to treat this as a hobby, even though it's your full-time job? Because personally, I need to know. I need to learn that.
Well, I'm kind of in the fortunate position that since I went freelance, I've basically worked 3 days a week for clients and 2 days a week for myself. So I have managed to carve out, a couple of days a week for the last 6 or 7 years where I can do what I want to do, which has made it a lot easier than, it would be otherwise. Now I've got a family and all the responsibilities that, and all the, all everything that comes with that. And I want to obviously, spend time with my wife and my kids as much as possible. So I didn't, prior to being able to split my time like that, any time that I had to work on my own stuff was really just after hours or spend time on the weekend, but then I'm taking away time from family stuff. And so I've been really fortunate in that I've been able to, carve out a niche where I'm able to, split my time like that and make it work kind of, financially and that sort of thing. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what would have happened otherwise. I think I would have just got super frustrated that I never got to actually develop any of my own ideas or explore or whatever. But I also feel like having been able and been fortunate enough to spend the time on my own stuff and improve, it's really because oftentimes like you can't show stuff because it's under NDA for years or it doesn't even ever come out. Like it's all of the work that I've done for myself that is now getting me jobs, right? Particularly this type of stuff where it's real-time visual development in stylized aesthetics. Increasingly, this is what I'm doing more so than 2D concept art. Like I'm working with an art director, oftentimes on early stages of games, and there will be some concept art there and there'll be like a general visual direction, but they haven't yet put anything necessarily into engine, or they don't have like a diorama or a snow globe. And my job increasingly is to take whatever the art direction on the concept art is and like deliver a real-time scene, and then they can move around in it and see if it's actually the aesthetic they want to go with. So it's been super beneficial for me professionally, as well as just like for my own sanity, my own development, to be able to, just like work on the things that I want to work on a regular basis.
I was going to ask how these projects have impacted your career. So you're kind of doing a little bit of like proof of concepts / like visual development, right? Is that what you would call it? Viz dev, like in-engine viz dev?
Like kind of real-time visual target.
Okay. So I hear that that is a very in-demand kind of skill set that not a lot of people have, both in films, animations, and games. And it's a hard skill set to get, right? Yeah, you're like sitting up there like chilling,
Yeah. No, I mean, I definitely think it's I didn't necessarily set out to be like a super generalist or anything. It was really driven by curiosity about everything, and a realization that I wasn't necessarily ever going to be really good at any one thing, but that I could create a skill set by combining, both 2D and 3D skills and an understanding of like game engines and stuff like that. Like I could within that skill set, I could basically cover all angles, whether it's like concept art or it's in-game stuff or it's like this real-time viz dev stuff. So really, it was like an acceptance of like, I'm never going to be like the best like character designer in the world or the best like concept painter, like environment painter, but with my kind of box of tricks or whatever, bag of tricks, I can sort of compensate for, wherever my shortcomings are. And
by having a niche.
And having a niche, I guess so.
Strong niche.
Yeah. And like I said, I didn't, it was really guided by my own interests and my own curiosity. I didn't think like, oh, this is maybe a good part of the industry to move into. But it definitely feels like, there is more and more of this kind of work out there, particularly like early stages before like there's a full development team, if it's if it's just R&D.
Yeah. Personally, I think that that's part of the fun of it is like you treated it like a hobby and now you get to do your hobby. It's nice, Now I want to talk to you about like all of your projects. I'm so curious about honestly each one. Like we could talk about this for 5 hours. I don't think in 2023 anybody has the attention span for that.
Right. It's true.
So
it's true.
So I wanted to know a couple of things about these projects. First thing is how, just kidding. So first thing is, what are your inspirations when you start a new one? What's your process like? How long does it take to make one full project that you have on your Artgram portfolio?
I try with the ideas that are supposed to be playable games to some degree, or at least, sort of proof of concept in terms of gameplay. Like this one, for instance, like this Spioramas thing, the idea for that started with game mechanics first and foremost. It was just this kind of idea of like, I mean, it was inspired actually a little bit by going on Sketchfab a few years ago and seeing like lots of cool little diorama scenes that people make like 3D dioramas, which they upload to Sketchfab, and then you can like rotate around them and you can zoom in and out on all the little details. And like,
I love
people
those.
seem to get a real kick out of that. And I was just kind of like, what if I extrapolated from that and made it into more of like a full scene with lots of stuff going on, and you're basically just solving lots of little puzzles, like interacting with various props and completing different objectives. Like what if it was almost like Where's Waldo or like Busy Town or something like that, whereas like big image with like tons of stuff going on and you have to like solve lots of little puzzles within that. So that was kind of the starting point for this. I just sort of, like this isn't the best example in terms of how I structure the development, because I definitely started from an aesthetic point of view more than just like, I didn't start with a grey block out. I basically just started building the scene out because I just wanted to play around with the style. But I'd had the kind of game concept idea first. But in general terms, like I'll start with an idea, whether it's, a gameplay exploration, a prototype, or if it's more of a visual idea, something I want to try out stylistically. And then I follow the same process pretty much every time, which is that I have like a group of subfolders. Like I have a whole drive of like, it's a ridiculous amount of like ideas that I developed to some degree or another, probably getting on towards 100 or something. But I always start with the same process, which is I have this subfolder or this group of folders, which just breaks everything down. It's very simple. Just break things down into like, documents, reference. As I start to work on it more, concepts or, actual a game project, builds, footage. Like I have this all set up, and anytime I start a new idea, I just like copy paste that series of folders and I start to build the idea. But in terms of documenting or growing an idea, I just tend to use either, just a text file, or more and more I'm using kind of flowcharts, like a Miro board, or there's another simple version called Bubble, which I use quite often, and just start like building kind of flowcharts of like, the idea starts here and then like it would transition to this and then this and this. So yeah, I think I'm addicted to that early stage, like blue sky thing where it's like anything is possible. And I really enjoy just coming up with a new mechanic, a new world to suit that mechanic or set of mechanics, and then a visual style that complements that, and then kind of going through that process over and over again. So yeah, I hope, does that answer the question?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about or tried to get one of your ideas made into something bigger? Like with a
Yeah, I mean,
team?
I've definitely, it's funny, like the first project that I put a lot of time into was a game prototype called Brave Odyssey. I think it's here on Artgram. It's like this little ship sailing around the seas, and like the idea was like way too ambitious for like a first attempt. It's that one with the green. Yeah. So this was kind of the first thing that I'd done like visual development projects, but this was the first game project that I worked on, when I was sort of trying to teach myself how to use various things within Unity. And I did get like quite a lot of interest, like including from, a number of, publishers and things like that. And, there was definitely the opportunity to get funding. I don't know. I guess it's like, it's such a commitment to go into it and do it full time, and I think maybe at a different stage of my career, like with fewer responsibilities and things like that, it would have been an easier decision to make. But I feel like once somebody else's money is like on the table, it's kind of like you've got to go all in basically, and you have to deliver. And I still just, I don't know that I could stick with the same idea for years at a time, if I'm honest with myself. I kind of, like I said before, the thing that really motivates me is learning first and foremost, like satisfying my own curiosity. And I've never quite gotten to the point where I've been so in love with a single idea that I'm like, this is the one sort of thing. There's definitely, I've had conversations in the past with people about getting funding, but yet to make that final leap to do it. It's not that I won't do it. Like I think I have to at some point. I think I'll be very frustrated with myself if I don't put
it's a different
something
kind
out.
of learning, right?
Absolutely.
In that case, they'll be learning how to, do director things.
There's so much of making a game that's not even making the game, like the actual development is probably half of it, right? There's so much once you get into like biz dev, PR, dealing with different platforms, and community management. It's like it's another world. It's like a whole other bunch of full-time jobs to do that. So I guess that's it. I guess I'm just a little wary of doing it unless I'm like 100%, this is absolutely what I want to do. But I live in hope that I find that project that makes me want to take the plunge.
The project that makes you want to settle down.
Yeah, exactly. I do kind of feel like that sometimes. Like I'm just like, I don't know. creatively compulsive or something like that. I don't know. Like...
I think it's fine. Like you might say this stuff is unfinished, but to everybody, at least to me and the students I showed all this work to today, it looks totally done. In fact, they were like, "How does he do so much?"
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of like smoke and mirrors going on there. You know what I mean? Like you're seeing it. I'm presenting things from the best possible angle a lot of the times. Like, I mean, I did finish 2 small games that I released for free on itch. So I have it. You know, releasing something commercially is a completely different experience, and you know, has so much. Like this, like is a little tiny game that I made in like a couple of weeks or something like that. And you know, I did at least put a front end on it, and there is a progression of sorts, and you can play it through from start to finish. But yeah, this is the exception rather than the rule. Like oftentimes, like I developed something to the point where I've satisfied my own kind of curiosity about whether I could get it to work. And then once I have, I'm kind of like, oh, okay, I'll move on to the next thing. Like, what's the next thing that I don't understand fully? And then, yeah.
That's fantastic, though. That's like one of the best ways to do this stuff. And then you're so versatile and adaptable, and you can do just about anything and get paid for doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that's... Yeah.
Oh, I love that sphere that just crushed all those little guys, poor things. So you've satisfied my curiosity on a lot of how your process is and kind of like your routines and skills, which is really, I was so curious about that stuff. Are you ready for the rapid fire parts of the podcast? Where it's not that rapid and it doesn't have that much fire, but
then yes, I'm ready.
So basically I have a bunch of little questions for you just to answer in a more snappy way. So let's get into it. What made you choose stylization over realism? We kind of already talked about that,
but well, I'm faster at this stuff than I am at realism, so I would say speed.
Perfect answer to begin the fire round. What was the best advice you ever got in your career?
Oh, wow.
It's a cruel question.
You know what? I think it's an obvious one, but it was, do work that you're passionate about, because people will always be able to tell, and they will resonate with that stuff. They will gravitate towards that if they can tell that you are enjoying what you were doing.
That's so real. And it comes through in your work. That's for sure.
Oh, cheers.
Worst advice you ever got?
Worst advice? I don't know that it's the particular, like I can't put it to like really specific, but I would say be aware of, teachers or people you look up to having a very specific way of doing it that works for them, and thinking that if you can't do it the way that they do it, that you can't be successful as an artist. Like I definitely tried to emulate, certain artists early on in my career, and I just didn't fit like with the style. I just couldn't do it, and I thought, well, that obviously makes me an inferior artist. Whereas really, you're better off trying to find your own niche, right? So yeah, just don't put too much weight on a single person's advice or teachings or their style,
Especially if they're inflexible with it, right?
Yeah,
it's my
exactly,
way or the highway, or there's only one way to do this thing.
Yeah, particularly if it's like a very specific way that they work that maybe practically nobody else does. It's like, but they're so good and they do it in this like really weird way. I've got to try and do the same thing. It's like, no, to find the way that works for you.
Yeah, I had teachers like that in college myself, and one of them was like, she made me reprint my business cards that I made for the first time I was ever going to go to GDC, because it was unprofessional to have like a little image of my work on there, and she just wanted the logo to be like my initials, and that's the only way to be professional and get a job. Yeah.
What? That's bizarre.
Isn't that? That stuck with me. Like, I remember being confused at the time, but like that stuck with me. Like, why are you so inflexible? Like, are you not the owner of the truth?
Yeah.
I reprinted better business cards after again. So nowadays, even my current business cards have a picture of the same model, FYI. It's been many years and I still have the same model on there.
That's great.
What are some mistakes you see people with less experience than you make in the industry, and how would they avoid them?
I think that knowing what your strongest pieces are within your portfolio and knowing the best way to present them is something that it takes a long time to get good at. Like, even if you've got good assets, say if you're a character artist or an environment artist, like learning how to present them well and like knowing which are the strongest things in your portfolio and maybe like cutting out stuff that's, you know, not going to come across favorably is it's a hard thing to, like, particularly when you've only got a small body of work. It can be hard to know what's good and what's bad, and like presentation is huge, right? Like you can, you know, have a beautiful environment scene, but if you choose the wrong camera angle, or if your lighting is uninspired, or, you know, you're not lighting the right things within the scene, then, you know, you're not going to get the full bang for the buck. So I think learning how to maximize what you have in your portfolio so you can present the best version of your abilities is super important, and is something that I see, you know, not a lot of people necessarily doing well, particularly early in their career. I'm sure I was exactly the same. I'm sure that like my first portfolio, if I could go back and look at it now, it would just be so awful. But,
advice for younger artists than us: save your old portfolios so that you can go back and look at it.
I wish. I mean, I kind of think the earliest that my stuff goes back maybe is, actually, I had a hard drive die a few months ago that had everything that I'd done from 2005 to about 2015 or something like that. So yeah, I kind of made the mistake of not backing it up online. But not that I'm excited to go back and look at it, but it is slightly sad.
Oh, I love going back and looking at it because it makes me feel like I've accomplished something in that time period.
Yeah,
like,
I still have like physical sketchbooks, because when I was sort of trying to improve as a 2D artist, I did most of it traditionally. So I still have like all these terrible pages of like mindless doodles and anatomy and stuff. But yeah, definitely keep it all. Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Keep it. Have you ever felt stuck? And if so, how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I have. I've definitely, and it's happened numerous times. Less so recently, but I think the advice I always try and give is to, one, don't give yourself a hard time if you just don't feel like you can be creative, particularly if, you know, if your time is limited. It can be a real chore to actually, say, come home and, you know, keep working on your own stuff in the evening or whatever. Definitely don't put too much pressure on yourself, but also try and do something, even if it's 5 minutes a day, even if it's just gathering some reference, or taking a few notes, or drawing for 10 minutes to see if you feel like continuing. Like, I think that it's so easy to lose momentum, like particularly with personal projects when you have a job already, or you have a college education, or whatever it is else is going on in your life, other employment. But I think that if you can keep a dialogue going with yourself, like a kind of creative flow, and you're constantly working towards something. And I've always, like, well, since sort of 2010 onwards, I found that developing these projects rather than trying to do individual pieces of work has been the best way to like improve as an artist, and also to maintain momentum in improving. I definitely have days when I don't feel like doing much of anything, but I try to at least, just gather some reference, or put together a mood board, or write down some notes for what I will do when I feel like actually doing something, just so that I don't completely stop. Because I think if you completely stop, then it can be hard, from my perspective at least, it can be hard to then get back up to speed again. But if I've got things ticking along in the background, even if it's just the, you know, most simple, easy stuff, then hopefully that means that when I do feel more inclined, I've kind of been building up a bunch of stuff that I want to work on, and just kind of then get back into it.
Just jump right in. It's so important not to miss that window, right? Like if you like
Hmm.
procrastinate for some reason, even when you feel like it, miss the window, you can go right back into the like uninspired version of yourself so fast.
Yeah, I think
Um,
that's it. And you can lose the whatever it was that made you want to work on something. It can suddenly feel way less important than it did previously. I just think like having that, I don't know if the dialogue with yourself is the right way to phrase it, but like I'll write notes for myself on a whiteboard or sticky notes on a computer screen, or I'll send myself an email at 4 in the morning or something, like say, don't forget you can work on this thing tomorrow or whatever. So it's like, yeah, try not to lose it. Ideas can be like super fragile. It's really easy to like crush them or forget what it was that was so vital about it that you wanted to work on it in the first place. Just keep momentum,
so true.
however possible.
Sometimes I fatigue myself just like planning out the idea, and when it comes time to execute, I'm already tired and I don't want to do it anymore.
Yeah,
So
yeah. You can sort of, and I definitely fall into this category. Well, I mean, kind of look at everything that I abandoned, but you can kind of fool yourself into thinking that you've finished the thing when you haven't actually done the thing, just because you sort of planned it out to the nth degree, and you kind of almost got that like endorphin rush from having, I don't know, planned it. I don't know.
yeah.
Like I do that all the time. Like I like flowcharts and stuff like that. Like I'll plan out like an entire like game design in like some massive, grand vision of a flowchart, and then I'm like, yeah, I'm done.
My
I've
work
done
here is
it.
done. You know that meme? And then you leave. Yeah. Yeah. That's hilarious. I do that too all the time. Sometimes I use the planning, or at least I used to much more. Now, every project I do has a deadline on it. It doesn't matter how I feel, right?
Oh yeah,
But before, I used to use the planning as a way to procrastinate as well
yeah,
and
yeah.
put
That's
off the
definitely,
actual work.
yeah. That's absolutely, yeah. I mean, I think that's it. You can sort of gather too much reference, or you can make one too many mood boards or whatever. So I would definitely, yeah, try and do actual work as well, the actual like artwork along with any of the kind of preparation tasks. Yeah, it's all part of it.
It's all part of the struggle.
Yeah.
What software do you use and for what?
Ooh, I use Photoshop, a very old version of Photoshop, a very old version of Maya. Um, so I'm not at the cutting edge in a lot of ways, and I use Unity and Unreal and ZBrush when I'm given the opportunity to. I still really like to sculpt if a job allows me to do that. But yeah, I'm a bit of a Luddite in some senses. I think that's part of like why I gravitate towards like these simple art styles, is that I know that I can use like pretty simple workflows a lot of the time for a lot of
You
this
know
stuff.
what?
Oh.
To me, that's not okay. Don't sell yourself short. To me, the real lesson here is that you can make amazing art with anything. So many people obsess,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I need to have the exact right version of Maya, like Blender's out of the question because it's not industry standard, things like
Yeah.
that. You know, some people are still stuck on like ZBrush 2018 or 2019. I don't remember which one it was that a lot of people got stuck on. Things like that. Like, you can still make glorious art. Like, don't let anything stop you like that. You can get the tools if you want them later, especially if you can't afford them. Like
Yeah,
that's a very common thing, you know.
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's it. It really just depends on what it is you want to make. And some tools are going to be more conducive to making certain types of things than others. And there are definitely ways that I could be more efficient. Like I know a lot of people, who I work with or worked with in the past have all transitioned over to Blender now. And like there are a lot of benefits to doing that. I can totally see why people have done that. But I'm also like, man, there's so much stuff I want to learn already. Do I really want to have to try and fight with another 3D applications UI? I kind of feel like I have so much muscle memory built up at this point with certain applications that it's like the thought of trying to relearn it is,
Yeah.
unless I'm forced to do so, I'm
Yeah.
going to kind of stick in my little my little niche for now.
You're in a position where you can easily get away with it. Um, so absolutely keep doing it.
whatever
I know I
works.
do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
works. It looks good. It gets the job done. I think I agree. I personally agree with that. So you have an online presence. You got a lot of followers on Twitter and other platforms. Would you say that that has impacted your life and or career in any way?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's two things. One, it's nice to put work online and get a positive response to it. Like I'd be lying if I said that it doesn't motivate me. You know, I feel like I'm fairly happy just noodling away on stuff in isolation to a degree, but I also kind of always have that sense of like, well, I like this, but I haven't showed it to anyone else yet. I really don't know. Like, am I crazy? Is this actually something that people respond to? So I do like that affirmation of like, I put something out and people are like, yeah, this is cool. I'm like, thank God. So that's one part. And then the other thing is like professionally as well. Like I've definitely gotten opportunities through Twitter and various art platforms. So yeah, it's definitely been positively impactful in the main. Yeah, I'm not totally sure what I'm going to do if and when Twitter completely implodes. I'm sort of trying to work out like where do I go next,
I
basically. But
almost feel like I feel like the danger of that is almost over. You know, it somehow managed to stay this long. I have weird hopes that it's staying, even though I don't agree with where it's going.
no, that's it. You kind of you just that's it. If you can kind of just cocoon yourself off in your own little bubble of like the things that I see generally is just like
Yeah.
cool art, cool game dev, photos of abandoned places in Japan. That's about it. So
Yeah.
that's about it.
Yeah, lately my entire feed has been like psychological like help. And I'm
All
like, wow,
right.
Twitter, what do you think about me? Okay.
Whoa.
Okay. Oh yeah, same thing with Instagram that they're making you pay for exposure now. Like
Oh wow, yeah. I
$16 a
never got
month or
into
something.
Instagram.
They
Yeah, it
would
was one
like
of
you
the
there.
platforms. Yeah, I don't know. And TikTok as well, I've never done. I think that if I did make a concerted effort to actually finish a game and put it out commercially, then I would have to have a presence on some of these other places. But for now, like Twitter and up until recently, ArtStation was a big part of where my audience was, but I'm not really on there at the moment. So yeah, kind of lost 35,000 followers overnight or whatever.
I
Hey
saw
ho.
I was going on your art station and I saw that you left. And I actually saw the comments and somebody was like literally mourning that you had left art station. They were like, wow, this is a really sad day for me. It was,
Yeah.
that's one of the impacts you have as being visible is people will actually like look up to you and use you as a driving force in their journey. So this
Mm-hmm.
guy was like, I'm so sad that you're leaving ArtStation because I used to use your portfolio as like the thing that got me into games or something like that.
Wow. Yeah.
And I was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
oh, wow. Yeah. I feel that.
Yeah.
That's its own gratification in its own way. I think that's the last of our rapid fires for today.
Okay.
Thank you, Nick, for talking to me for so long today. Your work, again, so nice. I love it. It makes me want to do like art that comes from the heart, you know?
Awesome. Yeah, I
And
appreciate that.
I feel like I haven't done that in so long. Like I said, like everything I do has a deadline on it. So everything is just,
Mm-hmm.
I need to like find what made me want to do this in the first place again. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean that's really gratifying to hear, and I hope you managed to find time in your schedule to do that and
I will.
to yeah find a project that speaks to you.
Yeah. I'm actually working on one right now. My first
Oh.
stylized environment. It's for a
Mm.
lecture, so it does have a deadline on it. But it is here. I'll show you real quick. Like it's like an unofficial part of the podcast.
Yeah, it's cool. I really like your color choices.
Don't mind my neon yellow guys in the middle there. Speaking of which, thanks again to our sponsor of today, Ringling College of Art and Design. Thank you so much, Nick, for being here today and spending a little time with me and sharing some of your expertise and your stories. Is there anything you want to promote?
Oof, not really. You can find me on Twitter, I guess, if you want to, at Nick D Carver. No underscores or anything, just at Nick D Carver. And I'm on Artgram as well, so you can probably find me on. I can't even remember what my URL is, but yeah, you'll find me.
Yeah, I'll
Artgram,
find it.
Nick Carver. Yeah. I think it's just artgram.co/Nick Carver or
It
something like
is,
that.
yes.
Yeah.
Artgram.co/Nick Carver.
Yeah. And I'll probably have a Cara account at some point, but like it's hard to maintain multiple presences. So
I don't even, I found out about Artgram today looking at your stuff.
Oh, really?
And now I need to get an account before somebody else takes my username.
All right, yeah. I don't know. I think maybe I picked the wrong horse. I think like more people have gone to Cara since ArtStation.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Nobody has time for this.
I know. That's it. Like I ended up spending probably an afternoon, when I actually went on my ArtStation account, it was like, okay, so I've got like, 100 things with probably between 5 and 10 images on each. It was a big ordeal to go through and make a new presence. So yeah, I don't really want to do it again for a while.
No, that sounds horrible. And you guys can find me on every social media, AnnaCarolina_arts. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and make sure to share this podcast with your friends if you want us to be able to keep making amazing episodes and bringing you amazing guests. Like, follow, share, subscribe. You know the drill. See you later.
Cheers. Yeah, it was great to meet you. Cheers.